to this month's Dr. Poole's SharePoint Surgery session, Prescription for Microsoft 365 Success, a Practical Approach to Adoption. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Poole, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. Richard works directly with Harmony field teams and partners. Bringing with him 17 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize significant benefits in productivity enabled by collaborative platforms. Richard earned his Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you, Susan, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's joined. So I think, the focus of today is really to kind of build on the fact that, a lot of you are moving to Office 365 or have done. And obviously, a few months ago, Microsoft kind of announced the kind of whole Microsoft 365 complete integrated and common platform, really, that Office 365 is a key part of, but also, the operating system in Windows 10 and also the kind of whole back-end security, Azure AD and everything behind that as well. And, so there's lots of different elements that are combined to bring together that complete platform. And so when we say sort of like Office 365, it could mean different things to different people, but obviously Microsoft 365 encompasses the actual platform on the devices and the infrastructure and all the management of that in the back end as well. So it's really kind of grown over the last few years. In terms of Office 365 itself as well, even in that element, there's a lot of different components. Obviously, the components that everybody's been using for many years with the likes of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. But also, there's been an evolving, let's say, a suite of products that Microsoft has introduced over the last few years. Things like Yammer as a social platform, Skype for Business as a communication platform, but also I think things such as Teams, which essentially is kind of let's say a take on what Slack are doing around kind of persistent and shared chat amongst teams, but built on top of some other components such as groups, which in itself is built on top of other elements as well. So there'd be parts of mailboxes and SharePoint libraries and conversations and things as well. So it's all quite confusing to end users, and we'll dig into that in a little bit as we go through. But also other components in Office 365 as well, such as Delve and Power BI for kind of analytics mechanisms and being able to discover content and discover information that's relevant to you and implementing kind of artificial intelligence and things. So we'd just like to ask a quick question to the audience of which elements of Office 365 are you actively using today, whether that's Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Teams, and any of the other components. Okay, we'll just give you a few moments to answer that. And a little bit longer because they're almost there. About 70% of people have voted so far. Okay, I think that's a good result. So let's take a look at those results, and you can see that the vast majority of you are utilizing SharePoint Online, which is not surprising. I think there's definitely been a big shift to moving your data from on-premise farms to online. And probably it looks about half of that is Exchange Online as well. So obviously there's different factors involved in moving your Exchange from on-premise to online and moving your SharePoint content from on-premise to online. OneDrive obviously is being very actively used, which is great because I think it's a really useful platform for individuals to centrally store their documents so that it's all managed and backed up and everything. And the Outlook web app interface is definitely growing, and I'm seeing a lot more of that with the customers and prospects that I meet in the market. So, and I think bringing up the rear is the Teams. So obviously that's the newest component of the platform, and I think probably most of you who are using it are kind of working out how you can make use of Teams. So that brings us nicely onto the next slide here, actually, because we really wanted to focus a little bit on Teams, because it's kind of something that's been introduced this year as a really new kind of platform, bringing lots of components together, and it's got a lot of scope to be a very useful set of tools, obviously to collaborate in a more ad hoc way. So anybody can create a team that they want to then add members to, and then they can add different streams of information to follow and be notified about, and then you can actually hold in your meetings within the team and a shared calendar and everything. However, I think the challenge that most people are seeing, and we're even seeing this ourselves, I mean, we're Office 365 users and we're utilizing Teams in certain areas of our business, is that I think, unless everybody in that team is actively using Teams, then it's another tool to go to. It's another interface, and it's in some ways, it's a big change for the end users. So you might get very kind of keen early adopters utilizing the platform in a very useful way, but there'll always be those that kind of contingent of people that still want to be working in an environment that's comfortable to them. Obviously, even things like file shares and those kind of things as well. Moving to SharePoint or OneDrive is quite a big step for those kind of people. Moving to Teams is maybe a step too far right now. So and even like from a notification point of view, unless you're kind of really spending your time in the Teams interface, you kind of like there's a lot of information that you end up missing or potentially miss. So as I say, for people that actively choose to adopt it, then it's a great platform, great tool, and it has lots of benefits. But I think for the rest of the community, it's a bit of a challenge. And if we take a look at some of those challenges across the board with Microsoft 365, there's different challenges in different areas and different demographics and how people actually need to get their work done and where they're spending their time. And obviously, like as I say, for an individual, they're going to be using email all the time. They're going to be using their OneDrive now, and that's great. But for kind of collaboration, they really need to start to embrace groups and teams and SharePoint, potentially EMEA as a social platform and things as well. So there's lots of challenges across the board. Now, one way to address those challenges of change and improve adoption of those tools as part of the overall platform is taking the harmony approach, which is bringing those elements into an environment that's familiar to the end users, and making it easy for them to use, easy for them to change the way that they work, and easy for them to kind of collaborate better and see the benefits that the platform can and tools can bring them. So, for example, there may be instances where you've got documentation in your file shares or on your local machine or in your email that you need to get into SharePoint or a team site or a team or a group or even your OneDrive. Being able to do all of that in one interface in a very slick, easy to use way is absolutely paramount for the end user. But then also being able to classify information that goes into those platforms so that they can be organized effectively, utilizing things like metadata and the like, so that people can start to see the benefit of actually adding that information in. But then also kind of discovering information that's already in the platform. So whether that's you searching for information or actually being notified and informed when there's relevant information that could help you get your job done in a number of different ways. And we'll take a look at that in a moment through a demonstration. And as I say, having a common interface into the different kind of data repositories, whether that's your OneDrive, your groups and your teams, or your SharePoint libraries. So having a common interface, a common way of working, but also being able to actually interact with each of them and between each of them as well. So we'll take a look at that. So without further ado, let's have a look at the product and see how it can help address all of those kind of challenges. So let's just switch to my Outlook. And you can see here that basically, I mean, some of you may be Harmony users, some of you may have not seen Harmony before, or some of you may have looked at it in the past. So Harmony is basically a sidebar on the right-hand side of your Outlook. Now, there's a number of different areas that we can focus on, but what I wanted to do here is really show that we can connect first off to all of those different areas. So as an example here, we can see I've got a number of SharePoint sites that I'm working in, that I've got access to, and there's sites that I'm following. So nice and easily, without the user having to configure these in the client, they can be automatically provisioned to the end user. So as soon as they launch the sidebar, for example, expand it, they can see where they need to access, but also I can see, for example, my OneDrive, so I can get to my personal documents nice and easily. And this is obviously the same kind of view as I would have in my OneDrive from any other interface, but it's in an environment that I'm spending my time. And from here, I can work on these documents. I can share them with people. I can preview the content, so I don't necessarily have to open up a document into the native application to take a look at what the document is and what changes might have occurred to it. But also, I can then go ahead and take some of that documentation that may be in a file share, in my OneDrive that I've been working on. So maybe I'm preparing some market research for a new project or something. So being able to actually take that document, copy it, and then actually put it into my team or my group that I'm working on. So for example, here, if I take a look at my groups and teams, we can see all of the groups and teams that I'm actually participating in, which is basically the same as the teams that I've got access to, for example, in the kind of Teams interface. So for example, here, I can go into my technical sales team. I can access all of the documentation that's been shared with that team. And I can also go ahead and actually paste that document that I was working on in my OneDrive into the team. So now it's shared with everybody who's got access or is a member of that team. And I can start to work collaboratively with my colleagues. I can even reach out to the people that may be authoring some of the other content in this particular team. So let's say, Ron's working on some other documentation that relates to the project we're working on. I can actually reach out to him using Skype for Business, for example. So I can send him a chat message, or I can call him over voice over IP. So again, integrating to all of those components of Office 365 that I need to get my job done. And then, as I say, I can check in, check out that document. I can add new versions and all those kind of things. But then when I've actually finished working on that with the team and we want to share that with our colleagues, we can maybe put it into SharePoint as a managed document. I could then again take that from the team and put that into a document library. So here we can see I've got access to a number of team sites in SharePoint that I'm a member of. And we've got access to all the different libraries that are there based on my permissions. So for example, if I go into, let's say, this document library here, I've got access to everything that I need to work on there. So I'm actually maybe working on a new project here, and I want to paste that document that we've we kind of like kicked around some ideas with an ad hoc team. So for example, here I can then choose the content type and maybe fill in all the required metadata that's necessary in that particular library. Now, as that project actually progresses, maybe I need to capture some further information. So you can see here it's presenting me with all the metadata that's required for this library. So let's go ahead and update that, get that checked into SharePoint. And from an end user's point of view, I'm not having to think too much about where I'm adopting a new platform. I'm actually using the platform straight away. So for example, here, if I've got some emails that relate to this project, I can simply drag and drop those into the sidebar to upload them into that same SharePoint location. And then it's captured in context with the project information. And obviously when I capture emails, we are also mapping header information directly into the properties in SharePoint. And likewise, if I've received some further documentation that relates to this project, then I can simply drag and drop that into the same interface as well. So nice and easily, I can really work with the system rather than working against it. And I can see straight away the benefits of me putting this information into the platform so that other people can actually access that and work on it, and I can then follow that for activity as well. So I can be notified when there's new updates, and when, for example, maybe when this market research document has been updated by one of my colleagues. So that's kind of talked a bit about kind of capturing and classifying information in a number of different ways, but as you can see, I haven't gone outside the realms of my Outlook, which is my comfort zone as a typical business user. That's where I spend my time. Now, if I want to find some content, we can do that in a number of different ways as well. So as an example, I can click into the top of the search bar, top of the sidebar, sorry, and it becomes a search bar. And then I can choose the scope of the search. Where do I want to find what type of information to say, okay, I'm looking for all proposals that I could use as templates or something. So if I do a search for proposals there, you'll see it's going to return a whole load of results from across my SharePoint environment. And for example, here, I can then say, well, actually, this proposal here may be something that is going to be useful to me. So I can, again, use the kind of preview capabilities to make sure that it's a document that I want to use. And it might be, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I can simply take that, as we saw before, copy that, and paste it into the library that we're actually working in here again. So now, again, I can then use that as a template. I can then build on top of that, reuse that information, and work on it from here. Again, I'm not having to switch interfaces here. I'm not having to go and adopt a new technology from an end user's point of view. I'm spending the time where I'm used to spending it. But also, I can then take that a step further to find out other information that relates to, let's say, this project, this email that I've actually received. And from here, I can click on what we call collage in Harmony, which brings together information from different sources. And right here, I'm connected to a number of different elements of Office 365, but also some other components from other systems as well, like Salesforce we use as a CRM system, or Zendesk as a support system. But actually, I can connect to multiple environments, multiple services, things like Dynamics and things as well, so that we can identify topics from the email that I've selected. In this case, it relates to a particular project I'm working on with a particular partner, for example. So I can see information about the partner and the client or the project name based on those intelligently identified topics. And then those topics can be used to show me updates from those systems I'm connected to. So it might be, for example, there's actually another document that's already been worked on for this project in SharePoint, or there could be other emails in Exchange that relate to those topics as well. And we can easily navigate using those topics. So for example, here, if I want to see any updates where Acme Consulting is mentioned, then it's going to give me a consolidated view of that information nice and easily. So there's lots of different ways that Harmony brings together the information that you actually need to get your job done. And once I've actually worked on all that documentation, maybe my colleagues have made the changes they need to, maybe I now need to send this this proposal to the client. So I can easily reply back to this email, or in fact I can open it up directly from Harmony. So even as another user in this team who didn't receive this email could then open up the original email that was sent, hit reply, and actually formulate the response to that email. So in a true collaborative environment, there's a lot of benefit to putting those kind of entities into a shared platform. So now I actually want to reply to this to say, here's this proposal, and I want to send it in the email. So I can either add it as a link to my email, and you'll notice that obviously when the recipient receives this email, they can simply click on that the link to click open it from SharePoint, or if they have Harmony installed, even if it's minimized or closed, then they have the option to say open that up from Harmony and go directly to it. So if I was sending this to a colleague, for example, it's a nice, easy way for them to start working on it as well and review any changes. They can see the version history and things without necessarily opening up the document itself in another interface. If I need to send that document to somebody externally, I can do it as an attachment as well, just by holding down the Alt key while I drag and drop the document into the email, and it'll attach the document instead of sending a link. But also, if I'm sending a link, let's just remove that for a second, I don't necessarily know if that user has access to this location. So just as an example, let's put Susan as a recipient there. And if I send that to Susan, it's going to check whether she has access to that document. And in this case, well, Susan doesn't have access, so I can choose to grant her view or edit capabilities so that she can work on a document there or access it as necessary. And then I can send it on its way. So again, you know, I think across the board, Harmony is integrating and utilizing all the key functions and features and benefits of Office 365, but presenting it to the user in a way that they can actually take benefit from very, very easily, very simply, and in an environment that's, you know, comfortable to them. So it's almost change by stealth. You know, you're changing the way that they're working, but you're kind of working with them, as I said before, rather than kind of working against them to say you need to go and adopt Teams. Right now, everybody needs to start launching Teams every day they start work, and have that open all the time and work from here. There's some people that are going to do that, but as I say, there's a big cross section of users in most companies, and their abilities and their attitude to change, because they simply want to get their job done. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what their job is. Their job isn't necessarily to embrace new technologies. So hopefully that's given you an intriguing insight into how Harmony can really help your end users to adopt Office 365 as Office 365 and Windows 365 evolves over time, because it is always an evolving platform, adding new capabilities, adding new platforms, adding new components within there. So on that point, we'd just like to ask a final poll question. So we'll just open that up for you for a few moments.
And excuse me, while you're answering the poll question, we'll ask Richard some of the questions that you have been asking during the webinar. Richard, somebody asked, we use Exchange Online, but our SharePoint is still on premises. Does Harmony support this environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of accessing SharePoint content, because basically we're an application within Outlook to connect to SharePoint, the Exchange part doesn't actually make any difference. So you could be using Exchange Online or Exchange on-premise, and it wouldn't have any effect on Harmony at all. Regarding SharePoint, we support both on-premise and online SharePoint, and you can in fact have a mixture, because it might be that you've got some SharePoint online for maybe for less controlled documentation, but maybe more stricter controlled information is still stored on premise. So, or maybe you're in the process of migrating from an on-premise farm to online, and Harmony connects to them both in exactly the same way, using the same SharePoint web services. And obviously the functionality may be slightly different between the two, depending on what you've actually got configured and enabled in those SharePoint platforms. But from a user's point of view, the UI is the same, and so that even helps from that point of view of getting to the cloud as well.
Okay, so the next question is there a way to switch from Harmony in Outlook to your services like Teams or Yammer based on the document that you're working with?
Okay, in terms of, it's an interesting one. So if I go into Outlook and say, obviously the collage part is in context with what I'm selecting here. So if I select a different email, for example, and take a look at the topics that I've been identified for that particular email, in this case EY is a customer of ours, and I can see information about EY. So I can see, for example, the emails that relate to EY, the support tickets that relate to EY, or it could be SharePoint documentation. So as an example here, I've actually got, let's say, a document that's been identified. In this case, it's a question around using our SDK. And so from there, I can actually then click on the item, and that will actually navigate to that particular document library in SharePoint with that item selected. So in that case, we can show the information in context.
Great. How do we deal with BYOD devices for security challenges?
Okay, so I mean, obviously the client is installed on the machine, so you need to have obviously access to the platform. Obviously, with Office 365, typically that's going to be accessible from anywhere with an internet connection. But you may have, implemented, ADFS or Azure AD or whatever to actually create a multi-factor authentication mechanism, and we support all of those with Harmony. So you could install obviously the Harmony app on any machine, and then as long as you can get a connection to the back-end platform, Harmony will be able to utilize that. And for example, for mobile devices, we also have a mobile application as well to access your SharePoint content, and that could be online. So, being able to actually use, your own phone, your own tablet, or whatever, and be able to access that content again can also be secured via, various VPNs or secure tunnels or MDM platforms and things as well.
Good, thank you. Which leads into your next question. The question is, do we have a Mac version for Outlook?
Okay, so unfortunately Mac doesn't support exactly the same plugin architecture that we have for Windows, and that's a limitation of Outlook basically. However, Outlook across the board, including Windows and Mac and in a web browser, support the new app model, and Harmony supports that too. So just as an example, you can see that I've actually got a number of different integrations here, and the other one here is actually the Harmony app, and this would look exactly the same on a Mac. So when I select an email, I can choose to launch the app, to then save the email or the attachments to SharePoint, and that is to say that will work both in the client in Windows and Mac, but also if you went into a browser interface for Outlook as well.
Thank you. Does Harmony work with IBM connections?
Yes, Harmony does work with IBM connections. In fact, we have, or IBM provide an integration to IBM Connections customers to Outlook, which is actually a Harmony OEM'd version. So in that case, instead of connecting to SharePoint, you connect to IBM Connections, and you have all the same kind of functionality that you have here. Some of it specific to IBM Connections functionality, but it's very, very similar. But also from a collage point of view, you'll notice that I can also connect to IBM Connections from a kind of update and information point of view as well. So even if you've got kind of a mixed environment of using Outlook with IBM Connections, then Harmony supports that as well.
Great, thank you. How do you make sure you're always using the latest version of Harmony?
Okay, so with Harmony, we issue typically a new version around about every quarter. You can check what version you have installed just by clicking on the About window there. You can see that 6.4 is the current version, and basically you want to have that as a managed version, so all your users are using the same version, a consistent platform. So as the administrator of Harmony, you can go to your download area on our website, log in with your credentials, and then you can always download the latest version. To be notified of when new versions are available, just go to our website, harmon.ie, sorry, and click on the blog. And then if you subscribe to that blog, you'll be notified whenever there's new updates or interesting articles around Harmony. So you can see here, for example, there's some new activity there. There might be a new update to the Office web app, or the Outlook integration, or you can see here information about the 6.4 release. and then from there you'll get a synopsis of what's been added, the new capabilities, and you can go into more detail from there as well. So once you've downloaded the new version, it's a new MSI package, and then you typically push that out to your users in the same way as you deployed the initial version. So typically that's done by the likes of SCCM or Landesk or something.
Great. Do you also integrate to other Office applications like Word?
Yes, we do, in a few different ways actually, and it depends whether you're running Office 365 or not. Because as I mentioned before, we've now got an Outlook app, which is also available for Office 365 customers. We also have the ability to extend that app to Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So for example, here you can see I've got ribbon controls to actually save documents to SharePoint or open them from SharePoint. For non-Office 365 customers, we also integrate to the standard built-in save as and open dialogues as well. So in that way, if I click Browse, for example here, you'll see that I've got access to any locations that I've marked as favorites in Harmony. So this list of locations is basically built up when I'm accessing my locations in SharePoint from Harmony. And then I can say that, okay, I want to save a document to a particular library, let's say this construction library. And then I'll be prompted for the content type and the metadata and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to go with one last question for you, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
If I have the business or enterprise version of Harmony, can I use the mobile version on my Android? Is that included in my license?
So yes, if you have the Harmony 1 license, which includes all of the Harmony products, then you are entitled to use the mobile application as well. If you have just a Harmony email license, then it is a separate license, or we can talk to you about basically upgrading you to the Harmony 1 packaging.
Great. And if we have questions that weren't answered, we'll get in touch with you shortly. Thank you, Richard, for that wonderful presentation, and thank everyone for joining us today. You'll receive an email with a link to view the webinar within a couple of days, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Thanks.